Whether you're new or experienced macro photographer, these tips will help you take sharper, more colourful photographs. So let's have a look at the equipment that I'm going to use today. So this is the Olympus OM-1 Mark II. Nice lightweight. You can flip the screen and tilt it to get down to difficult places. It's got the 60mm macro, very small lens, but incredibly sharp and perfect for macro work. So let's set that up. Choosing the right flower. Before I even start taking photographs, I like to spend a few minutes just walking around and looking at the flowers. One of the biggest mistakes when photographing flowers is simply finding a flower, put the camera in front of it and take the photograph. Sometimes that works, but quite often the flower isn't the problem. It's the background, the lighting, or the angle that we took the shot from. So the first thing I'm looking for is a flower that's in good condition. I want the petals to look fresh, with no obvious damage, brown edges, petals that are starting to wilt. Those little imperfections that become surprisingly noticeable when we're using a macro lens. I'm also looking at the shape of the flower. Some flowers work particularly well for the macro photography because they have interesting centers, layers of petals or strong colours. But don't just look at the flower itself. Take a look at what's around. The background is really important. With a 60mm macro lens, I can get a lovely soft background, but I still need to choose that background carefully. Bright leaves, fence pieces, garden equipment, patches of sky all become distracting areas in the photograph. So I'll show you the camera settings that I'm using to take the macro photographs of the flowers. So first of all, you take off the lens hood. That's usually step number one. I'm shooting in aperture priority, so you just turn the dial around, if you can see it there, till it lines up with the white dot. Aperture, we're looking for around about 5.6. So that'll give us a certain amount of depth of field without having a too shallow focusing area. So that should work well and give us a bit of a blurred background. ISO, we're going to shoot on automatic. I'm not sure if that's going to show. I'll do a close-up afterwards. So I'm just going to go through the basic settings that we need for the macro flower photography, and if we click on the OK button on the back of the camera, they come up and you can see what we got. And if we turn the dial, which keeps disappearing, you can see we've got a P in the top left hand corner, and what we want is set on A, which it is, for aperture priority. Then we want ISO automatic, which is 8000 at the moment because I've got the lens cap on to try and keep the screen clean. But in daylight that would be about 200, 300, 400 ASA. The next thing we want to adjust is continue autofocus. And again, that can be single autofocus, continual autofocus, or manual, which can be good to use sometimes. But at the moment, I'm going to set it for continual autofocus. And we want single shots. So if we click on single shots, we're on single shot now. And then we could be on single shot with a heart by it, and that means it's silent. when we take the picture, but we don't. I like to have the shutter sound, knowing that you've taken the photograph, and then you can do sequential, but there's no reason to have it set on that for the flowers, so we'll set it on single. And focus, and we've got it on single point focus. Is you can change the size you want, but we want it on point, the smallest one. And I think that's about it. White balance is on auto, which is fine. I'm not using flash. Everything else is okay. Now that we have chosen our flower and we have got the camera ready, let's talk about composition. Composition is basically about deciding what we want a photograph to look like and how we want the viewer's eyes to move around the image. And the good thing about flower photography is that we don't need a complicated composition. Quite often, keeping things simple produces the strongest photograph. The first thing I think about is the flower itself. What is it about this particular flower that caught my attention? It might be the colour, the shape, the petals, the centre of the flower, or perhaps the way the light falls on it. Once I've decided that I like the flower, I want to make sure that the photograph emphasises the feature rather than distracts from it. That's where the background becomes really important. When we were using a macro lens, the background can become beautifully soft and out of focus, but we still need to pay attention to what actually is in the background. Bright spots, leaves, branches, or other objects that can easily draw the viewer's attention away from the flower. So I'm always looking around the frame and asking myself, is there anything helping the photograph, or is there something distracting from the main subject? Another important part of composition is how much of the frame the flower occupies. Sometimes the flower can fill most of the frame, allowing us to concentrate on detail, colour and texture. Other times, leaving a little more space around the flower can give the photograph a completely different feeling and show something about the environment where the flower is growing. There isn't really a right or wrong answer. It depends on what you're trying to show. I also think about where the flower sits within the frame. Putting the subject directly in the centre can work well, particularly when the flower has a strong symmetrical shape. But sometimes moving the subject slightly to one side can make a photograph feel more balanced and give the image a little more space. And don't forget about the edges of the photograph. It's very easy to concentrate on the flower in the middle and overlook something distracting at the edge of the frame. Before I press the shutter, I like to take a quick look around the entire image and check in the flower, the background, the edge, and overall balance of the photograph. One of the advantages of using a 60mm macro lens is that I can control this quite easy by changing the distance from the subject and choosing how much of the flower I want to include. And don't be afraid to experiment. Digital photography gives us the opportunity to take several photographs and try different compositions without worrying about wasted film. I might take several photographs concentrating on the detail, another showing some of the flower, and another including some of the surrounding garden. I can then decide which one tells the best story. The important thing is to slow down rather than simply point the camera and press the shutter. Take a moment to look at what you're photographing and ask yourself, what do I want the photograph to say? Once you've decided that, composition becomes much easier. So, when you're photographing flowers, remember to think about your subject, the background, the amount of space around the flower, where you placed in the frame, and anything that might distract the viewer. Keep things simple, take your time, and don't be afraid to experiment. Sometimes the smallest changes in composition can make a very ordinary flower photograph look much more interesting. Remember these simple tips. Look for fresh flowers, make sure there's no damage on the flowers. We're looking for slightly overcast, not direct sunlight. Sunlight will bleach them out and make the contrast too harsh. And the most important thing is to enjoy yourself. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.